Today, the titan of entrepreneurship, Matt Barrie, joins us once again. While we're focusing on his acquisition of Freelancer.com and his strategy surrounding that, we also discuss how to build a moat around your business, macro trends, how to follow them and why, and the best marketing dollars Matt ever spent. Enjoy the show. First, serious about online trading? Secure your funds, keep your merchandise safe, and use a company that keeps the buyer and seller protected the whole way through. That's escrow.com. Payments you can trust.
FD was built by domain investors to increase your inquiries, sales, and profit. Forget spreadsheets and archived emails. Manage your entire investment portfolio in one place using a secure and completely confidential platform. Learn more at ft.com. That's EFTY, ft.com.
Hey, Sherpa Network. I'm Tess Diaz, executive producer of DomainSherpa.com. And today we have a brilliant entrepreneur and experienced executive in a much larger space than the domain space who has come and joined us as CEO of Escrow.com. Hello, Matt Barrie. How are you today?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Delighted to have you joining us from Sydney. And Andrew Rosner, CEO of MediaOptions.com. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Matt.
How you going?
I'm doing great. I think we couldn't have picked three people in more distant locations. We've got West Coast West Coast Europe, and East Coast Australia.
Correct. We're going global.
Yeah. We made it happen. The sun is rising here in Phoenix. I see it setting in Sydney. Beautiful background, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
And you're in the Escrow and Freelancer shared office space in Sydney. Is that correct?
Correct. This is the headquarters for the Freelancer Limited Group.
Very nice. So you started out as CEO of Freelancer before acquiring Escrow. Is that correct?
That's right. I mean, the Freelancer Group has actually acquired 23 companies. 15 of them were actually direct competitors of Freelancer. Ironically, I purchased a lot of those businesses actually through escrow.com before I even owned it. And then end of 2015, we acquired escrow.com.
How did Escrow come to be on your radar to acquire?
Well, I used the website and I liked it. And I was looking to get into the payments industry for a variety of reasons. And I just have a habit of when I use a website I like, asking if I'd like to sell it to me, and you never know what will happen. And in this case, I mean, I thought it was actually a large financial institution. I mean, it had $2.something billion worth of payment volume at that point in time, clicking over on the homepage, and I thought it was just some sort of Silicon Valley bank or institution of some sort. And I was actually remarkably surprised when they said, actually, it is for sale. If you're interested in looking at the deck, we can send it to you. And so I looked at it and I thought, wow, this is phenomenal, and I bought the business.
Wow. Do you think your assumption that it was a large financial institution, was it all connected to the domain name escrow.com?
Well, certainly I think that's where the amazing thing was, I mean, this was a business that was running for 20 years before we acquired it. I mean, it was started by almost 20 years. It was started by Fidelity in 1999, and SoftBank and others put in, I think, about $40 million into it back then. And obviously, it was very, very early days on the internet in terms of being able to buy and sell things. It was a great idea, but it was just, back when the internet had 50 million people on it, and it was stuck inside a large corporate for many, 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 many years. And I think that the fact it looked like a financial institution is probably the reason why all the Silicon Valley venture capitalists missed it, right? They probably just didn't realize that this was a business that could be financed and taken to the next level. So I was quite lucky to have acquired it.
Lucky and smart. You just asked, and developing that habit of reaching out and asking makes a difference, eh?
It does. You never know if you never ask.
That's exactly right.
Tell us about the acquisition process with Escrow. So you reached out, it was already for sale. What incredible timing.
Well, I've been for sale for actually many, many, many years. So there was actually a corporate advisor who had the business for sale. And in fact, I actually saw many iterations of the pitch deck that had different investment banks logos on it. I think at one point it was Solomon Smith Barney, and then it went through, I think it was Citibank at one point, and then Capstone. And I mean, I don't know how many years the broker had it for, the advisor had it for, but I was very surprised to see that it was for sale, and I was lucky to purchase it. So,
what were the
I
negotiations?
think what was interesting was they were shopping, and you're right, it was on the market sort of quite passively, I would say, for years. And what was interesting is that they'd never shopped it to anybody in the domain industry, for kind of obvious reasons. It's like, you hate to let your customers know that you're out there trying to sell your business.
Right.
But it's like the most obvious buyers were in the industry, and they, and if you ask, because I asked multiple times, and no, the business isn't for sale. And
oh, really?
yeah, it's interesting. I think in the end, you stole that business. It's an interesting business.
What do you
It's a
mean?
good acquisition.
Based on the price that he paid?
Well, the price he paid isn't public, I don't believe.
It is
but-
actually it is public because it's in my financial results. We have to file these things. Yeah.
Lay it on us, Matt. What did you acquire escrow.com for?
7.1 million US after adjustments.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, congratulations. And how did the negotiations go? What can you tell us about them? Besides that, it had been on the market for a long time. Did they present that visibly? I mean, verbally, or did you only notice it as you saw the pitch deck iterations?
Well, I noticed it from the pitch deck when it had a logo of an investment bank that was not where the person who was brokering it was working. I checked file properties, and I think it said I can't remember what it was for sale for. But I mean, it's a complicated business. Obviously, it's a regulated business, so you have to get regulatory approval in order to acquire these businesses, which requires quite a lot of work and quite a lot of effort. So it is a difficult business to buy. Not everyone could actually buy it, and it was really only because I had the Freelancer group behind me, and we have a whole compliance team and CFOs group, etc., that we managed to buy the business. If we were trying to do it, as I think a domainer, I think it would be actually quite difficult because of the resources that's required. I mean, this is a business that it makes slim margins. I mean, last year it did about 570.6 million worth of transaction volume, but the margins are only about 1.3 to 1.4%. So as a result, for a long time, Fidelity was carrying it. Now to the point where it's profitable, and it's growing very strongly. In the first quarter, it grew 45% year on year in terms of the volume. But it does need a fair bit of infrastructure, particularly around compliance, around AML, anti-money laundering, and verifications and security. That really means that you really should have a bigger organization kind of supporting it. So we're kind of lucky that we have the Freelancer group to do that.
And the experience, because this isn't the first company you've acquired like this, right?
It's the first company that's acquired that's regulated like this, and let me tell you, it's not an easy business to run a regulated business. There's a lot of work you got to do. In the United States,
which is why innovation in payments has lagged so much.
Well,
it's just impossible to.
So, I mean, it's a money transmission business effectively, or escrow business in some states. And so in the US, it's state-by-state licensing. So there's 50 states, 4 states don't require licensing, 6 territories, you need 52 financial services licenses to operate. And each of those licenses, I need to be fingerprinted, palm printed, arm printed. I didn't know this was a thing. My days of cat burglary in Nevada are over. You have to put a balance sheet of my assets. Criminal background checks. Have to do this in 52 times. We have to do this for the directors of the company. I've got a non-executive director who is just an investor because he owns more than 5% of the business. He has to do it. His wife has to do it, which is strange.
Oh.
And then you've got all the laws you've got to deal with in terms of how that all works. So, for example, in California, they require you to have an escrow manager do the approvals. So you need to have an office in California, obviously. You're not allowed to collect interest on the money you hold in accounts. That's a kind of a bit of a misnomer. Some people think you can do that, you can't. With the exception of Arizona, where you can do it, and then you have to offer it to the customer if they want to collect interest and pay it. Washington requires you to have separate trust accounts. All the laws are kind of same, but a little bit different. And you have to be regularly audited by the regulators, and so you'll get knock at the door. Hi, we're North Carolina. Okay, come in. How many customers do you have in North Carolina? I'm not sure. And they kind of sit down and they go through an audit. So we're being audited continually. So that requires obviously a sophisticated compliance team to be able to go through all that. And that's just the United States. Right. In Australia, we had to get an Australian financial services license, which also was relatively complicated. In Australia, you have like this circular thing where to have a financial services license, you need to have set of responsible managers, where a responsible manager has worked with another licensee as a responsible manager previously. So it's a little bit of catch-22 for the most part. We're lucky because our head of compliance actually was head of compliance for PayPal in Australia for 2005 to 2012, and actually wrote the prudential regulation for them that the government used to license PayPal in Australia as a prudential business. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes that has to happen in order to operate this sort of business.
And this is one of your 23 companies. That's incredible, Matt.
Well, I only have 5 now that are operating. The rest I've merged in because they're direct competitors. So there were about 15 competitors of Freelancer, which I merged into each other. And then there's five businesses. So.
And then how did Escrow integrate into Freelancer? What was your vision for that when you bought it, and how has that developed over time?
Well, the reason why I bought the business it was a couple of reasons. The first was that marketplaces I saw in the future are increasingly being regulated like payments businesses. And certainly, I mean, I could say that the defining characteristic of 2019, 2018 has been the regulation that's coming to the technology industry is extreme, right? It really is extreme. You've got a 3-way trade war with Europe, US, and China. So Europe will fine Apple, 14 billion euros. And then Deutsche Bank gets fined by the US $9 billion, I think it was, and backwards and forwards. So the EU launches GDPR, which is targeted squarely at Google and Facebook, and then they launch VAT on digital downloads in 28 jurisdictions in Europe. Of course, all the jurisdictions have different tax rates, which is you'd think in the European Union that the whole point was to harmonise these sort of things, but they don't. Then California is now coming out with a GDPR on steroids, et cetera, and so forth. So there's always all this stuff that's happening, but certainly with marketplaces, I could just have a feeling that marketplaces are kind of quasi-payment systems because money goes in and money goes out to third parties. Yeah. And in fact, there's a bunch of marketplaces actually that are operating in the domain space, kind of like payment systems, right? They're like the big marketplaces like your Cedo and your Afternics and whatever they kind of are functioning like payment systems, right? And so regulation is going to come in a big way into marketplaces, and certainly we're seeing that in Europe, for example. There's a thing called PSD2, which is the Payment Services Directive 2, where marketplaces now can no longer collect a payment unless you have a license. So you can't actually.
Is that license the same as a money transfer license?
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so you have to be a money transmitter basically, or the equivalent in Europe.
Is this why eBay? Do you think they had the foresight to buy PayPal? Do you think that was one of the reasons? Or do you think it was just I
think it's one of the reasons. I think then they were mad to spin it out. I think it's just nuts because now they're building a payment system again, right? So
I've never understood that.
Like I don't know what happened.
Just a market cap thing. They were just like, let's.
Yeah, maybe I don't know. Anyway, the flip side of that is strategically you want to own the customer all the way to the payment. So we were getting freelancers sign up in India. They'll do a website for someone. They'll get $200. They go to withdraw it. Oh, gee, I've got to open a PayPal account. So every one of our customers was being leaked into basically eBay. And eBay was trying to enter our space, I think 3 or 4 or maybe 5 times with various marketplaces for jobs. So and partnerships with competitors and so forth. So we just didn't want to leak that customer data out. So I thought to myself, I had to get a payment system somehow. So I basically was always on the lookout. And the problem is, it's just so hard to start these things from scratch. That's why the landscape really is. It's just a tough, from a competitive perspective, to enter the payment space because number one, you can't survive with a payments company unless you have a captive marketplace like eBay and PayPal, right? You feed off it. I mean, in fact, there's a fascinating book called The PayPal Wars, which talks about how PayPal Peter Thiel tried diversifying away from eBay any way he could. Like he tried gambling, I think he tried porn at one point. Any part of the market you could get into to try and get volume for payments, and he just couldn't diversify away from eBay, and then at some point eBay was like, well, we have to kind of buy this business because it does, I think like 30% of our transactions, and otherwise we're leaking all our customer data to the payments business. So they had to come together. So for some time I was kind of looking for how I'd do that. The problem is that, when you have to get state-by-state licensing, I think the wait time in New York is about 2 years. And that's only if you have volume, and if you have volume and a priori, they're probably going to fine you, right? And you might not get a license. So you got to be very careful in this sort of circumstances. So, and it's very, very, very tough. And if you're making only 1.5%, you need $70 million of volume to make $1 million, right? So it's just very, very, very tough business to get going and get started.
Now, Matt, I've heard you describe Freelancer as the eBay of freelance work services. Did eBay's acquisition, give me this in a timeline, did eBay's acquisition of PayPal inspire you to want a payment service, or was it just your use of it, or a combination? Because in the very beginning, you just said, oh, I was using escrow all the time, so I bought it. But it sounds like a lot more went into it than just that.
No, I had a plan to buy a payments business. I had a plan, for a very, very, very long time to buy a payments business. And when I looked at escrow, I was just surprised to know that I could buy it, right? I mean, I was looking everywhere for maybe bust payment business, maybe that had kind of run out of money, but had licensing. And I was just lucky, very, very, very lucky.
Yeah, you really were. Did eBay's acquisition of PayPal, where did that play into all this?
Well, that happened many years before.
Yeah,
a long time before. But certainly, I did look at the global marketplaces of products, and they've all got payments businesses. Whether you're talking Amazon Payments, Google has got its own payments business. Facebook's now launching apparently a global coin, and so forth. So, there's reasons why these marketplaces have payments businesses. You want to own the customer all the way down to the payment, basically.
Yeah. So integrating that into Freelancer sounds like it must have been much easier than just the actual acquisition itself and all the licensing involved. What was that transition like? Because did you already send all your customers through escrow?
Well, we actually haven't integrated it yet. We're in the process of doing that right now as we speak. As I said before, in Europe, there's now a directive that payments have to go through a licensed payments business. And also California, the Department of Business Oversight also is forming a view now, correctly or incorrectly, but they're the regulator, that you have to have an escrow license to be able to take a payment as a marketplace. So we have basically now integrated escrow into Freelancer, and it's about to go live in the next month, basically.
And how much has Freelancer increased the business of escrow? I know you were so very data driven. What do you see there? What percentage of the business does that grow for you?
I'm not sure about in terms of the volume. Once the Freelancer volume goes through, we'll be putting a large amount of payments through. But I mean, you remember also escrow does process a huge amount of volume already. And that's growing quite strongly. So, it contributes a bit, but really, there's going to be some advantages from having a sort of a unified account that spans across all our properties, and all the things you'll be able to do with that. If you've got a payment method and you've got things you can hire people to do various things, it will give a lot of convenience to people.
Yeah, very much.
Would that be a very deep integration? Meaning, will I single sign on with escrow? That'll be the same account I've got with Freelancer.
Yeah, ultimately, yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Ultimately, yes.
We've been working on this. We've been working on this for some time. So that's not going to happen initially in the next month, but that's the next stage after we launch it.
Okay. So let's talk about market differentiation for escrow.com. What are some of the complex issues and risks that users likely aren't aware of? Because even all this, regulation and arm print, I've never heard of. Right? It's so complex on the back end, but for users, what are they not aware of, but they should be when they're choosing an escrow company?
Well, no one's licensed other than us, right? If you look out in the space, all the other companies that exist, the small ones, they're all shutting down because they all have one license, basically, if that. So, Payoneer tried entering the space. So they had a good 2 years of it, and they were probably a company that could have had the best shot at trying to compete in the space, simply because they did have a financial services business in debit cards. So they could provide the prepaid debit cards that people can withdraw money from, like Airbnb, and we used to use Payoneer as well until they entered the escrow space. They had 2 years at it, and they gave up. PaySafe Escrow just gave up, right? So they've stopped business now, and that happened only about 1 or 2 months ago. There's plenty more that are just going to shut down one by one because you need to be licensed. It's as simple as that. The law's the law, and there's a reason why the laws are set up is because you're dealing with very large sums of money, potentially millions of dollars in the transaction, and you can't have that money sitting in the general operating account of the business, right? It's got to be in trust, and it's got to be under a certain level of prudential control. And there are a couple of escrow companies floating around, particularly in the domain space, that don't do that. And your money just sits on the balance sheet. And if they can't pay out, something else, it may be that your money for your escrow gets used, right?
Wages, and insurance, whatever.
Yeah.
Which is for me, before I even understood the regulatory framework that surrounds escrow, which I've become somewhat familiar with because of the volume of transactions we're doing with you guys, and all the the various companies worldwide that are always asking, okay, so why am I protected? How does this work? Well, and people that aren't familiar with escrow, when we're there's a lot of education that goes into it, onboarding a customer. But what always made sense to me was that, like, if I'm doing a transaction with some third-party platform, whatever, and that company goes, some of these transactions take a long time from start to finish. Sometimes these closing cycles can be, sometimes it could be a couple of hours, sometimes it could be literally years. So long as that money is sitting there, if that company goes bankrupt, if that company gets sued, if there's a judgment against them, there's nothing you can do. I mean, those funds are totally attached to that company's operating business. And very few people realize that. I mean, it's like nobody prices that into the fact, into the equation. It's like, well, these guys are 1% cheaper, or a half a point cheaper, a couple of basis points cheaper, whatever, or I like this guy better, whatever it is. But these are not rational arguments, because to me, I've always looked at this and said, well, it's like, what's the cost of completely de-risking, right?
Exactly. I mean, the last thing you want, if you're buying or selling something that's of high value, the last thing you want is execution risk on the actual payment, right? I mean, you've gone through all the negotiation, all the hard bit, and at the end of the day, okay, they sent their money, and then what? Just the money disappears because you send it to a fly-by-night operation that is using it to pay their wages or whatever. So it's ridiculous.
And even eliminating that outlier possibility of the money disappearing, the company goes bankrupt, the company gets sued, etc. It's like, it's exactly what you said. It's like, the hard work is getting them to the finish line.
That's right.
And just getting them to trust the payment processor or platform. It's like, I want it to be a no-brainer. And I've always just felt that when I tell somebody that we're going to use escrow.com, it's abundantly apparent exactly what it is you guys do and provide. And, there's a level of trust there. And so it's like, why would I want to create any more hurdles in my process? It's like, my job is to sell the domain or the website. And then once I get them to that point, I want it to be as seamless and thoughtless as possible. And anything else just always seemed to me to be just another hurdle, like more explaining to do, more getting them comfortable.
So, I mean, can you imagine the damage that happens to the domain space if one of these fly-by-night operations that serves the domain industry shuts down and people lose their money? People say, oh, I bought a domain name. I won't buy a domain name again because my money was lost when I tried buying it. And I just blame the domain industry. There are plenty of examples in the financial security space of companies, very, very, very large companies that have fallen over, and the funds that have been held ostensibly for securities actually is collateralizing the actual operating debts of the company. There was a big CFD provider that went under many years ago, I think around the time of the global financial crisis. In Australia, we had a bunch of stockbrokers that did this. The stockbrokers that you'd buy stocks through them, and they'll give you high LVRs, so you could leverage up But the way they could do that is they held everything, all the money in a big pool, and they could everyone could anyone's money could be used to pay off anyone else's money, and they couldn't settle one day, and the whole thing fell over. And I actually know a guy in Australia who's a CEO who borrowed money against his own stock to buy more stock, and because that company fell over, his company was going great. He lost everything. Everything he'd ever worked for was just gone overnight through no fault of his own. Just the broker he used was using money to pay other people's debts. So that could very well happen with some of these small operations that aren't regulated. So
that's really scary. And on the user end, we're coming in with a domain background, which is already an intangible asset. And so for escrow's business, how much is, a service? How much is an intangible asset? And then you also do escrow for things like eBay's used cars, right?
Right. So we do things like boats, cars, aeroplanes, jewelry, gemstones, diamonds, artwork, zebras, shipping containers of like alfalfa from the US to China. I think I saw a mineral rights go through just recently. So mining rights over land. We've secured, I think, manganese down a railroad in Africa.
What is that?
Manganese shipment down a railroad. They couldn't get insurance for part of the transport, so they put money into escrow instead. Surrogacy agreements. There's one of the content aggregators for Amazon uses us to pay out the studios when they produce content. There's a space station that might get off the ground in 2021 called Aurora by Orionspan. It's $10 million a ticket, and we're taking deposits for that already. So anything that's complicated, expensive, we do it.
So I have a question. In a different life, I was in the fish business, as many of our audience knows, and we used to ship. We were everybody thought that we were this like huge company in New Bedford, Massachusetts, with boats and manufacturing plant. But actually, we were a few folks sitting in office, much like Media Options is today. Instead of trading domains, we were trading container loads of frozen fish, mostly scallops, actually. And our primary function, even though we bought a lot of local seafood and exported it or repacked it, white labeled it, et cetera, what our primary, let's say, niche or competitive advantage was that we were like the largest importer of Japanese scallops, one of the huge importer of Chinese scallops, and probably the biggest importer of Peruvian and Chilean scallops. And the way that very few. We had maybe 2 relationships where we had been doing business long enough where we actually just trusted these folks to, we pay them 50% and then 50% upon receipt. But for the most part, these were not folks that you could trust. I mean, in the fish business, to be honest with you, it's like, it's actually, I attribute a lot of it to my success in the domain business because I was dealing with some of the worst human beings on the planet. Like these people are literally out to cut your throat at any given opportunity they can. And it's just a commonly accepted principle in that business. And you operate under that.
One time Drew was trying to explain that to me and he was like, no, Tess, they'll harpoon your boat. They do. They'll harpoon your boat so they get there first and their catch is more valuable. I mean,
wow. It's a crazy business. So, but the point is, like, we use bank letter of credit for the most part to settle a lot of these things. And it seems to me that escrow.com could serve the same function and probably easier and faster and cheaper.
It does.
So my question is, how do you verify that? So I buy a 40-foot container of frozen scallops in Japan, and that shipment leaves Japan. You've got a bill of lading, and they send me the bill of lading, and usually we would pay upon receipt of the bill of lading. Containers on the water, they can't recall it, and then but the issue was that it could arrive and it could be a container full of carpet shavings, which literally happened to us once. And and so how do you, so that container arrives to me. Now, let's say that I've put the money into escrow.com. Container arrives to me. How do you verify that we've received what was paid for?
Well, there's an inspection period, and you can put whatever you want in the contract, right? So you can upload a custom contract that you have between your supplier and yourself, and then you have a time period to do an inspection, and then you can have provision in the contract for a post-sale inspection, a post-sale adjustment. So once the container arrives, you can inspect it. You can say it's not up to quality, and then whatever you've got, you can set up for whatever industry you're in. You can set an adjustment. Maybe you're buying widgets, and you say, okay, the defect rate can be 1%, but if it's higher than 1%, you're going to probably a credit against what are the excess defects. So it's really up to you, and whatever's tailored for your industry. And industry by industry, it's going to be different. So, for example, when people sell an aeroplane, they typically will fly it to location. They'll negotiate the price, put the funds into escrow, they'll fly it to location, and then they'll do an inspection, and there'll be a post-sale adjustment or post-transaction adjustment at the end. So it's really up to you. You can upload a custom contract, put anything in it.
And how do you avoid becoming an arbitrator? Like, how do you avoid having to settle the dispute?
Well, the arbitration you can do through third parties. So we use things like net arbs, net arbitration, or we can file something in the local court in Santa Clara and get a judgment on something if it's something expensive and valuable, and you want to get a proper judicial examination of what's going on.
Yeah, interesting. And so for physical goods like that, is the rate more or less what it is in domains, or what is?
In terms of the pricing?
Yeah.
It really depends on volume. So, for commercial customers, 89 basis points or better, usually that sort of volume. So, but it all depends on the industry and what it is. I mean, different assets have different risk profiles. If you've got a car or you've got an airplane, you know what it is. There's a VIN number, or
not a lot of variables.
It's in a registry somewhere. You know where it is. It's physical. It's hard for it to go disappear. If it's something like more intangible, the software or what have you, can be a bit more complicated because you just,
it's tricky.
So the pricing does vary depending on what you're actually selling.
Yeah. Okay.
So you see all these fascinating transactions on the back end, including with domain names.
Yes.
What percentage of escrow's total revenues are from domain names?
It's quite a lot. It's over half. I haven't got the number exactly in front of me, but it's a fair bit. So I think in this report, what did we report here for Q1?
Wait,
I think we did about, what was it? 85 million in the first quarter for domains. I think our total volume was about 150.
So about
a fair bit. Over half.
That's a significant portion of escrow's business. Were you aware of the domain industry before acquiring escrow?
I was. I didn't know that the escrow is so big in domain names. When you think about it, it kind of makes sense because it's almost like an ideal asset to sell through escrow, right? You buy a domain for $1 million. Who you're going to send the money? Who you're going to send the password? Who goes first? You need to have a trusted third party in the middle. We are rapidly building out tools and enhancements to the product to diversify out of domain names. So we've just signed a bunch of very large car marketplaces in North America. We've gone to aircraft marketplaces, we're going to commodity marketplaces and so forth. So that we are rapidly expanding into a whole bunch of different areas. And we're also building industry by industry specific offerings for those industries. So, there's a lot to go. It's a very big space. I mean, it's kind of like, in the world of international trade and commerce, there's a wonderful payment system. And there's so many different places you can take it.
I'm curious about with domain names. I can't think of someone better positioned than you, Matt, to advise the domain industry really as a whole. You see all the transactions on the back end. You have such an expansive knowledge as an entrepreneur. You're very forward thinking. Where do you see missed opportunities? Where would you do things differently in the domain industry? I know that you don't have plans because of your positioning in escrow to come in and take over the domain space. But what would you do if you could or would?
Well, Andrew and I had actually a couple of conversations around this. I mean, I think that domain names are really virtual real estate, right? And that's kind of where we get to with the title of this quarterly report that we publish. And so I think that all the infrastructure you see around real estate in the real world, you're probably going to end up seeing in the virtual world. So, for example, we've started doing sort of domain name holding transactions a little while ago, which allows you to kind of lease to buy a domain. At some point, I'd like to offer the ability to finance a domain name purchase. So you want to buy a domain, you can't afford it, we can offer financing, just like you go buy a car or you go buy a house and you get a home loan or a car loan, and so on. And I'm sure there's going to be a whole bunch of niche industries popping up around that provide all the different ancillary services you have in the physical space for real estate.
One of the products that I've always thought would be a natural fit for you guys would be an insurance product. And it's killed me that there's never been insurance for domain names, because it would open up so many opportunities. And it seems like you guys are like uniquely suited for that. Even if you added it's like when you're booking a flight ticket, it's like, oh, do you want travel insurance? You're setting up an escrow transaction. It's like, do you want to insure this? Right. And I feel like because of the volume that you're doing, it could be so cheap and a really effective product, probably a great revenue stream actually. But
what will you insure?
So fitness, basically fitness. So well, there's two things that you can insure. One is theft. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you're insuring the title, basically like title insurance. And the second thing is fitness. So meaning that we're transacting a very, very, probably one of the most valuable domains in the world right now. Mm-hmm. And this is going to end up on your platform any day now, in the next 7 to 10 days. Okay. And the biggest concern that the buyer has, and this is something that very few people, even at the highest levels in the domain market, are even thinking about, is the fitness of this domain for its perceived purpose.
Right.
And when I say fitness, I'm primarily talking about SEO and Google. So, what is the link profile on this domain look like? And these are, what is the probability this domain will actually be able to perform in search engines? Or is it going to have some hidden, there was a great article about girlfriend.com, which is a domain that we brokered actually. And there was an article about, I think it was SEO Journal, or I don't remember which one, and talking about, they've spent 3 years, I think, building this thing out, and they put a ton of money into it, and they're very competent, folks in the SEO world who are doing this, and they can't get it to rank even for their own brand name. And there's no warnings in Google. There's no, there's no apparent reason. And again, these are very competent folks. And so they went onto the webmaster forum with, I forget what his name is, the head of SEO for
Matt Cutts.
He replaced Matt Cutts.
Yeah.
And
John Mueller.
Yeah, exactly. John Mueller.
Yeah, this is on Search Engine Journal.
Yeah, and so, they're talking about this issue, and it was like, even he was stumped. He was like, okay. And in the end, he was very skeptical, like, oh, you must be doing something wrong. And in the end, the conclusion was, oh, you know what? You're right. There must be something here, with Google that is preventing you from ranking. And it's not something that we're showing publicly. And in the end, it looks like you must have had to do something with the fact that it was an adult site back in the day. And they probably like internally flagged this domain as adult. And so they won't let it rank for anything that is not adult.
I'm not sure how someone could price the risk on that. That's all.
Well, so I think what's interesting is that I think it can be done, and the reason is most of the inputs. Now, this is a unique situation, right, where there's this hidden,
penalty or something
domain that nobody can become aware of. But I think that it could easily be done by you guys if you had like, a DNS record. You insert a DNS record that allows. You guys have access to Google Webmaster, or whatever, and you can see whether or not there's any penalties or warnings on the back end. You can pull in data from things like Ahrefs and SEO mods for looking at the link profile, seeing if there's spammy links, seeing if there's links coming from link farms and things of that nature. There are, there's pretty clear indicators for probably 95% the things that would lead to a non-fitness situation. And I think most of that is publicly available data.
Yeah, it seems to me that I think that'd be something very, very difficult for an insurance company to price. I mean, surely they could probably price the theft risk. On this, what probably it probably be better suited with some sort of indemnity basket where you know, you purchase the domain and there's like a holdback, and we hold the holdback in escrow for a period of time, and you know, there's some sort of adjustment that happens if there's a problem with the domain, right? Like almost like an earn out, like, you know, like there's some sort of you know, 12-month indemnification agreement that, you know, we can do something rather. I'm not sure exactly how you structure that, but that's my general feeling. I think if you went to an insurance company and tried to get them to price it, it would just throw their hands in the air. And the other thing is, for us to offer insurance directly, I think there's another whole set of 52 licenses we'd have to get to do insurance. So that's the problem with Freelancer, for example. Like we want to offer healthcare and you know, chargeback insurance and a whole bunch of things on Freelancer. But the problem is when you go to a third-party healthcare provider, they operate in one country. And it's like, I don't want to sign up to, you know, 185 of these things. So, you know, offer it.
Interesting. Yeah. So this was a very interesting conversation exploring opportunities escrow.com may have in the domain space. But Matt, I really want to know, what opportunities do you see in within the domain industry or industry segments they operate in? Where, from your back-end knowledge, are you noticing things that you would do differently in the domain space?
Well, I think as a whole, I mean, even though there's been tremendous appreciation in domain names, I think the whole industry is tremendously underpriced, right? You know, like you want to buy a shop front anywhere, right? What's a building going to cost you to buy a shop front, right? Yeah. And then if you objectively measure the foot traffic that goes past that shop front, and mind you, that's in one locality and one location somewhere in the world, whatever, and you compare that to the traffic you can get on the internet from people anywhere in the world, and the ability to scale that foot traffic. I mean, a shop front's only, you've got a limited capacity in terms of number of customers that be inside the store. Yeah. Right? And then you just buy another, build a bigger store, get more, you know, more space, right? You know, with the domain name, you have infinite capacity, right? So, you know, you just do the comparison on it, and the domain industry is just going to go up and up and up and up and up, right? Like, you know.
So I agree with you 1,000%. And in my opinion, what holds us back is the fact that there's no agreed upon framework for valuing a domain. And I think that, like, so, you know, you mentioned the comparison to real estate, and that many of the mechanisms around commercial real estate will be adopted into the domain space. And I think that literally, like insurance, like financing, like, you know, third-party financing, like, you know, lease to own, you know, all of these things. I think the one hurdle that we haven't overcome is an agreed upon framework for how to value a domain name. That's an interesting effect.
Hey, Adeline, can you please turn the lights again? Thank you. Sorry. Just you with the cleaner.
Yeah. And so I don't know, you know, we're working on some things on our end, you know, how to address that, but I'd be interested to hear, you know, how you think we could address that. But I think that that's really the thing that's holding us back from achieving, you know, capturing, what I like to say, bringing price closer to value, right? Because I think you and I both agree that the enterprise value of these domains is like exponentially higher than what it is. I would say probably 10x. And I say that because, you know, you look at something, exactly the analogy you were giving. I like to use Tiffany's. And Tiffany's, I forget the number, but I think it's like they pay $18 million a month or something for their flagship store on Fifth Avenue in New York. And Tess, don't even correct me if I'm wrong, please. And but whatever, it's an absurd number. And it's one store, one location, and most of that foot traffic is just tourists and tire kickers. Yeah. And I'm sure the store does good numbers, but they're losing money hand over fist on that store. And you know, they look at it and they say, well, but it's marketing and advertising, it enhances our brand. Yeah. Well, does it enhance your brand as much as owning diamond.com would, right? Which is global, offers, you know, an incredible amount of trust and you know, signifies luxury. And it's like, you know, a diamond is a girl's best friend. I mean, how do you take something like a diamond is a girl's best friend and you know, which was De Beers, and if you're Tiffany's, how do you create something that is equally as powerful and global? Well, you just say, if you own diamond.com and you want every person who buys a wedding ring for their fiance to buy a Tiffany diamond ring, well, you know, owning diamond.com, I think helps you get there. But they would, you know, and we've spoken to Tiffany's, we're trying to sell diamond.com as we speak. And it's like, you know, all the big companies, the low hanging fruit, they don't get it. They say, oh, but we're already synonymous with diamonds. Well, how can you be synonymous with diamonds when your competitor just told me they're synonymous with diamonds? And the other guy over here thinks he's synonymous with diamonds.
And they're all buying from the same mines.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like
how do you differentiate? And what's interesting is I think the people who are going to buy diamond.com are going to be the people making synthetic diamonds, which is, I think,
oh wow,
great.
That's great. Well, that was certainly put the cat amongst the pigeons, right? I mean, like you had the chance to own the space, and now you're going to be disrupted, right?
But isn't that a common theme? Don't we see that, like, always? It's like everybody thinks that they're comfortable, and no, we don't need that. We don't need that. We don't need that. Yeah. We're the Goliath, and then David comes along with a better plan. And
well, I did that with Freelancer.com. I did that with the domain for Freelancer.com. So I mean, we were called Get a Freelancer originally when I bought the first business, and you know, I was happy with that name. Where you're from? I'm from Get a Freelancer. People understand you get a freelancer, right? Mm-hmm. And Simon, who gave me the original money to buy the business, said to me, "Why don't you buy Freelancer.com, the domain name?" And I thought, oh, do I really have to? I mean, a rose is by any other name still a rose. You know, why should I change the name? And I thought, you know, it'd be weird. I kind of walk in and go, "Where are you from?" "I'm from Freelancer." And it's like, okay, what does that mean, right? Like, it's pretty abstract. Are you a freelance photographer? Even today when I go to conferences, sometimes it's kind of funny. I get my little name tag and say, "Oh, who do you freelance for?" It's like, you know, right? You know, and so, but I thought about it and I thought, well, what, you know, Simon said, what happens if someone else gets it? And I thought, well, I will be forever subordinated, like permanently.
Exactly.
You know, we will be Get a Freelancer, and they will be Freelancer, and we will be permanently subordinated, right? Yep. With a second or third class brand. And I didn't realize until I bought it that, you know, someone meets someone on the street. "Hey, did you know you can hire a freelancer to do a particular job for you?" And I go home and go, "What's the name of the company again? Desk something or other." I type in freelancer into Google. We were like 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10 front page of Google. And then the journalists remember it, the customers remember it, everyone remembers that you're the canonical industry defining name, brand, right? So, yeah. So, I mean, Tiffany's been nuts not to buy diamond.com. And once it's gone forever.
Forever. That's it. You know, once it's sold, it's off the market forever.
Gone.
And it's how can you be so short-sighted to think, well, okay, here we are today. I've got my budget. I've got my pipeline. I've got my plans. I've got these projects I'm working on. And I say, you know, oh, wow, diamond.com, it's on the market. And I'm like, well, okay, doesn't fit in my budget, doesn't fit into my pipeline, doesn't fit into my plans right now. But let's look forward the next 10 years. Are you really confident that over the next 10 years, Tiffany's isn't going to, you know, somebody at Tiffany's is going to say, oh, you know what would be perfect right now is diamond.com. I mean, it's like, we look at the growth of, you know, brick and mortar retail, and it's like this. And you look at the growth of digital retail, and it's like, you know, hockey stick. And it's like, over the next 10 years, you don't think this is going to be a valuable asset for your pipeline, for your, you know, it won't make your budget even more efficient and effective. But, you know.
I just typed in how to buy a diamond into Google. Number 1 is Hardy Brothers. Number 2 is Lumero Diamonds. Diamonds.pro, Blue Nile, Choice, American Gem Society, WikiHow, Brilliance.com. Tiffany's is not even it's not even there.
Nope.
On the right-hand side, there's someone selling it. There's Tiffany's in like a sponsored marketplace sort of thing.
Yeah.
Just what they're like 2, 3, 5. It appears 5 times. But down the main search results, it's not there.
Unbelievable.
And there's so much assumption of dominance in so many industries. And when they don't integrate bringing in clients who aren't already connected to a particular brand, when they don't bring in that the generic or the exact match from that end, it's not that, you know, anyone would recommend that Tiffany's rebrand as diamond.com. But if you are synonymous with it, here's a way to really do that and to prevent disruption. Now, Matt, go ahead.
Before we leave that conversation, if that's where you're going, I don't know. I have 2 points, things, let's say innovations in the domain space that I wanted your thoughts on. Mm-hmm. So one is deal structure and the sort of innovation of the typical deal structure, and if you see any trend that supports what I believe should be where we're headed. And so that's what I think is the most interesting, let's say, deal structure innovation should be or would be one of two things. Either the lease to own, which I feel like we're seeing, we're not seeing hockey stick growth in that section, but we're seeing more deal flow happening on either owner finance or more likely a lease to own structure where there's somebody pays a deposit for a option to buy at a fixed price. Maybe that fixed price escalates over time, but it's you've got some path to ownership, and then there's a lease component which allows you to use the domain. And this is a great structure because it avoids the risk of bankruptcy for the domain owner if the entity you're providing the domain to goes bankrupt. Where if you're just doing straight owner financing, you run the risk of, okay, this guy's paid 40% of the domain value, declares bankruptcy, and now your domain is just for the assignment of creditors. And second is more of a venture capital approach to domain sales, which is like maybe there's a option to buy, maybe it's structured like a lease to own, what I just mentioned, but the purchase price is either convertible debt or it's like a call option. So at the domain owners, maybe it's, both parties have to agree, or maybe it's at the domain owner's will, but they have basically a call option on equity at whatever the valuation would be at that time, or the last completed valuation round. And it's like, we've got xyz.com and we sell it. It's $1 million. You're paying $5,000 a month for a lease. You've paid some maybe $50,000, $100,000 for your option to buy, and 2 years in, you've gone out, you've raised some venture capital, you're not quite ready to buy out the domain. I, as a domain owner, think that you are a really attractive on a really attractive growth path, and I said, well, I'd like to convert my $1 million purchase option or some portion of it into equity in your next fundraising round. And I think that this, to me, seems like the best way for domain owners to capture some of that enterprise value. Now, to me, the biggest hurdle to that is two things, which is understanding domain value, right? And the wider public understanding domain value. And the second is that domain investors, squatters, as the wider market likes to call us, we have a bad reputation with people, and they don't necessarily want us on the cap table. So as somebody who is intimately familiar with the domain industry, more intimate than probably 99.9% of people in the industry, and somebody who is in the startup world, in the corporate world, what are your thoughts on that subject? You think you've got a unique perspective.
I think that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. I think one of the best investments I ever made in Freelancer was getting the name, Freelancer.com, right? It really just gave us, it is so much more powerful than sticking the money into marketing. Like, it's unbelievable. Like you forever have the premium brand. In fact, one of the competitors had to stop using the word freelancer for many years. They called them contractors. But my mum thinks contractors build bridges, right? So you had a whole competitor got confused, had to change the whole terminology, because every time they talked about freelancers, they drove more traffic to us, right? So that's how powerful having the canonical name is for an industry, right? The premium search term that everyone types in.
Category killer.
Yeah, it's just game over. Journalist recall, customer recall. It's such a free kick.
Word of mouth marketing, the most powerful marketing in the world.
Yeah, so I think those things all make sense, and these are all things I think that naturally will come into the industry. I think the first thing you need to have that is good data, So there needs to be, a long track record of data where people can see, okay, these domain prices are fairly stable. They do appreciate over time. It's not like Bitcoin, where it's going to up, down, yo-yo, altcoin, whatever. So that's what we're trying to do with these quarterly reports is, we're best positioned in the world pretty much to release this data because we've got 20 years of data quarter by quarter of what's happened, right? 4-letter domains, keyword domains, 6-letter domains, etc. And so if there's good data out there, then that means that other actors might be prepared to come in and do things like provide financing because they know that, wow, okay, if I'm going to offer $1 billion to for domain financing, you want to make sure that if the domain name prices is not going to crash to zero, right? And to do that, you show 20 years of history, stable growth. As we showed in the report, that it is in the very, very first report we did a survey looking at bonds, stocks, real estate, physical real estate, and we showed it was better than physical real estate. It's certainly a lot less to maintenance. Right? You're paying $7. How much do you pay? $7 a year?
Yeah, $8 is like unbelievable.
Right, compared to council rates and repairs and electricity and all the other stuff you got to pay.
Taxes, everything.
Exactly.
Taxes, property insurance, broken pipes, broken stove.
Exactly. So if you can see,
Matt can't even keep the electricity on.
Automatic lighting goes off after a while. But yeah, if you've got the data out there, then you've got another number of financial players that might come in and go, hang on, this is actually a pretty phenomenal industry. It behaves just like real estate, but it's better, right? Because it's got uncapped ability to grow. Pretty much, you're only capped by the size of the world population, right?
Yep.
Global customers, and maybe we are prepared to prefer to lend to for a domain name purchase than a physical real estate. Right? Because what's the loss given default, right? Well, if someone defaults on a domain name lease, well, the domain just sits in our escrow account. You've got the domain back instantly, like within seconds. Here's the domain, right?
Yeah.
And then you just have to look at, well, is the pricing stable? What's the resale value? What's the LVRs we're prepared to offer on that domain, right? So I think this is all going to come in a big way, and I think it's going to really be a boom to the space. And I'm seeing now houses in Hong Kong, they're for sale for $360 million US, right?
Yeah.
In Australia, I mean, we'd never sold a house above $20 million until 2002, but now there's, a friend of mine bought a house for $100 million, then one bought for $73 million. My areas are $20 million houses, right? I mean, domain names generally aren't even close to that yet, right? And we're seeing some start to go through in that price range, but it's just going to be natural.
So Matt, you mentioned that escrow, about, a large portion of your business is domains, but you're working to really expand beyond domains. But these quarterly reports, does escrow issue a quarterly report for any other industry besides domains?
No, we don't.
Okay. And you just started, you mentioned that the first report, looked at stocks and bonds and domains all together.
Yep.
That was just this January 2019 was your first quarterly report. And now that'll be moving forward. Is that part of a plan to grow the domain business?
So we just issued the second report. So the first report was quite detailed and went through and looked through the history of all those asset classes. And then we did the first quarter's update for that just in March. We actually are in the process of, I literally interviewed someone today to come on as marketing manager to actually look at some of the other industry verticals and what we need to do to target them. So there's a lot we can do targeting, the vehicle markets, the art market, the developers using the API that we've got, which allows you to kind of integrate escrow as easy as PayPal, and also more broadly the consumer market and just how we can educate people. Never buy or sell anything online unless you use escrow.com. So that's something we're going to embark on doing pretty soon.
Nice. Where, as a serial entrepreneur and a business builder, where do you see low-hanging fruit in the domain industry? Outside of your niche in escrow, outside.
The low-hanging fruit's in the pricing, I think.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, I bought a domain name recently, Andrew. I thought I got that pretty cheaply. But livestock.com, I think that's going to be worth something in the future. So, but pricing is just so cheap still.
But you know, it's such a perfect example because it's like, okay, livestock.com. You're talking about a category killer name for one of the largest industries on the planet. And it's like, if you are the platform by which even 1% of that market transacts, which it seems like a natural thing. It's like, oh, just, take escrow.com and white label it onto livestock.com and just be like, the platform for transacting livestock. Yeah. And it's like, what is that market worth? And it's so big. And then you say, okay, to be fair, we went out, we marketed livestock.com and many of the existing players, just like I said with diamond.com, it's like, they don't get it. They don't, why do I need livestock? And particularly in livestock, because, it's an old industry like seafood. But when you just take a step back and you say, okay, what is the value of just transacting a tiny little part of that market here on this platform? What's the enterprise value of this domain? And it's so many multiples, so many orders of magnitude greater than what these domains are selling for today. And that is ultimately the value. Everybody likes to talk about what's the value of this thing? The value is, we're not even talking about real value today. We're not. What we're talking about is price and what the price is that the market will accept. But what we got to do is bring that gap between price and value closer together. What do you think is the timeline on that? Just pull it out of thin air. What do you think?
Well, you never know. You never know because when things get momentum, they can just take off. I mean, look at the Bitcoin price, right? I mean, if people cannabis stocks, lithium stocks, right? Like people jump on it and they think, wow, there's a big opportunity here. Then you get a boom, right? And then it just takes off. I mean, 2013, the global livestock trade was $883 billion. It's going to be over $1 trillion for the industry, right? Trillion. Right?
$1 trillion.
Yeah.
So 1% of 883
1/100th of a percent.
billion. 1/100th of a percent?
I don't even,
Well, I'm taking your original here. 1% of 883 billion.
$800 million.
No, 8.3.
8.83
sorry.
million.
Mm-hmm.
Not bad. Today.
No, hold on.
With a B.
I don't know. There are a lot of zeros.
8 billion. Yeah, it'd be 8
billion.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
8 billion.
1%.
Yeah.
1%.
Okay. So my mathematical skills aren't so hot. Who are the business leaders in the domain industry you respect the most?
I don't pick favorites. They're all good. They're all good. I can't pick favorites.
Well, they're not all good.
I know, but I'm not going to put.
But it's a difficult.
What's the craziest thing you've ever seen exchanged over escrow?
Like surrogacy agreements. Like if you have a baby for someone in the US, which is legal to do that and pay for that. You'll have like fetal heartbeat will get a payment, and then fetal heartbeat plus 1 month will get a payment in 2 months. Because if you're carrying someone's child, and you're being as a surrogate, you're being paid for it. If you miscarry, you won't get paid, and you've been through all that. Wow. Have a tough job, but you want to make sure you get paid, right? So there's things like that go through. Livestock, for example. It's complicated to move livestock around the world. You need to make sure it arrives alive, and quarantine documents, the shipping documents, and so forth. That can be complicated. I mean, this space station, Aurora, that they're talking about, they're selling tickets for $10 million a seat. That's going through escrow. As we speak, you could put down a deposit of $80,000 right now for that, which would be interesting. World's first luxury space hotel. Right?
Do either you guys want to go?
I'll go after 10,000 people come back.
Yeah, exactly.
Then I'll buy a ticket. But the 10,000 first ticket, provided there's been no accidents along the way.
All right. What's the highest ticket that's ever gone through escrow.com?
I believe it's about 25 million.
Can you tell us what it was?
I think it's a portfolio of domains.
All right, domains winning it again.
I'd have to ask Jackson on that one to get precise. I'm pretty sure it's about 25.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And do you think escrow will? Do you have plans to accept Bitcoin, crypto?
Never. Never.
Never is a big word. Never is a big word.
I'll accept FedCoin when the Federal Reserve releases FedCoin, but other than that, I will not accept crypto. And the reason why, simply, I mean, I was an adjunct associate professor of cryptography for 14 years, so this is what I taught in class. But the problem is governments hate it because governments don't want to lose control of the money supply, right? And if you start a Bitcoin company, you can't open a bank account. They won't let you, right? Like I know there's a Bitcoin startup in town that's open. It's up to their 50th bank account, right? And you just can't do it. I mean, the regulators don't like it. You become a magnet for hacking, right? Like a complete magnet. I mean, all software is buggy. All software is buggy, and the bigger the software, the more buggy it is, right? So these exchanges, they wake up and day all the money's missing. No one really knows how much volume is really going through the cryptocurrencies. There's a Wall Street Journal report that came out just recently saying actually it's 90% lower than everyone thinks it is. It's just people with paying you a take and so forth. So I don't know, the whole industry. I mean, I can't buy my groceries with it. I can't pay my rent with it. So why would I buy it?
You can. Whole Foods through a third-party intermediary now lets you.
Yeah, I know. You can buy a card that doesn't work, but I'm not going to touch it. It's just too hard, and it's too much trouble.
It puts a target on your back.
I mean, I think what will happen ultimately is the Federal Reserve will come out with FedCoin. There'll be some sort of digital cryptocurrency, probably not crypto, probably is digital currency that the US will issue, because governments ultimately, I think, will like digital currencies because you can tax them in real time and do all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, you can't avoid taxes.
Exactly.
You follow the money all the way around everywhere.
Pay as you go. Every time you do a transaction, the sales tax goes straight in, right? So I think something like that will happen, and then if the US government releases a coin, we'll support it. And there'll always be like a Bitcoin around forever from here on in to do all sorts of nefarious transactions, but we don't want to have anything to do with that sort of thing. So it's just too difficult. I just don't think it's necessary. And look, anyone, frankly, that's holding $1 million in Bitcoin right now, you probably should sell it. Like, buy some gold or something. I don't know. Or to buy a domain. Swap it for a domain name quickly.
What does your domain investment portfolio look like in relation to the rest of your investment portfolio and just in general?
I've got a bunch of really good domains. I don't really want to talk about them because we haven't publicly disclosed the names that we have because they may be future businesses that we start. I just don't want to preempt anything in the market. But I've got probably 30 pretty high quality domains, I think, that we bought over time in key segments that I think are big future areas for the business to go into. And we just have to, some of them have been sitting on for years. We just have to kind of, get enough resources together to be able to go and start something serious in some of those segments.
Okay. And
just as a show of support, I've seen a few of these names, and I mean, either Matt personally or through the company owns some really lights out, phenomenal, bang on keyword domains.
Yeah. I was lucky, right, and early. And some of those names I got for a great price. I tried doing it now; there'd be 0 already on the end of them, right? So
So pretty heavily, you prefer keyword domains, exact match domains. I've heard you say livestock.com, freelancer.com, escrow.com, and I heard Andrew say keyword.
I do like the canonical search term used to define the industry, right? I think that they are just the absolute killer domain name to have. You just define the whole industry.
I just can't think of a way to better associate your brand with the industry that you target. It's like, isn't that what branding is? Isn't that what marketing? Isn't that what the task of marketing is, like to say, okay, we're Tiffany. Let's say, it's Tiffany's day one. We're Tiffany's, and we want to go out and, we've decided who we are. We've got this ethos, and we want to go out to the market and teach them who we are. so that when they go to make a purchase decision, they associate us with that item. How can you better associate your brand to the market that you're in than owning the category killing domain name? I
think it's twofold. I think it's one is you want the name to be the category defining name. Number two, what happens if your competitor gets it? So
exactly.
if a synthetic diamond company gets diamond.com, and every day millions of men are looking up on the internet, how to buy engagement ring or how to buy diamond ring on Google, and they find, oh wow, did you know you can buy synthetic diamond just as good as Tiffany's but cheaper?
No, not just as good. These diamonds are flawless.
Yeah, more perfect.
Perfect diamonds, chemically indistinguishable from a natural diamond. Chemically indistinguishable, but perfect and flawless and grown in the lab.
Yeah, it's just why you'd be nuts not to grab it. Nuts.
Yeah.
So
send Tiffany's this video afterwards.
Yeah.
So with with Escrow's quarterly report for the domain industry, where can the DomainSherpa, the average listener, where can they sign up to receive this, check this out?
You just go to the homepage, escrow.com, and on the homepage is a section where you can just type in your email address, and we'll email you the report. We actually are going to build a part of the site which will have all the previous reports listed. We haven't done that yet.
Very cool.
But if you just go to the homepage and sign up, we'll send it to you.
Nice. All right, and I will make sure to have the 2 reports available from DomainSherpa as well for our audience who's listening. If anyone hasn't read it or hasn't really sat down and extrapolated from it, there's just, no pun intended, a gold mine of information in there. So
That's right.
Yeah, good for you. Matt, thank you for all you do for the domain industry. I think that you coming into this space has been a real gift to the domain community. And I think that these quarterly reports in particular are really going to continue to grow our industry. Thank you for joining us here today. And we're very much looking forward to having you on the show again in the future.
Great. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, Matt.